Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another episode of the Dr. Will Show, where I interview educators and entrepreneurs on leveling up. Each episode, I zoom in someone who's dope, and we just sit back and have a conversation on what it means to live your best life. Now, if this is your first time checking out the podcast, this is the Mobile University for Entrepreneurs, and I'm your host, Dr. Will. Today's guest is Shontavia Johnson. It's square. She's coming on the podcast. We're going to be talking about entrepreneurship, her journey into entrepreneurship, and get some gems for her to drop. She has this wonderful business that she's doing. I went to the website and I was like, oh, branding and business, the look graphic and all that. I said, this is nice. Let's have her on. And she came, because I sent out this blanket tweet of, hey, I'm looking for Black educators and entrepreneurs to interview on my podcast. And she came up and I was like, let me check this out. Oh, yes. So I really want to have her on. I'm very anxious and excited to speak with her. And hopefully you will be more pumped, amped, excited to go out there and make that impact and an income once you check out the episode. So for those who'll be listening on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, Stitcher, and Spotify, will you please introduce yourself, Shontavia?
Thank you so much, Dr. Will. I'm excited to be here. You've had a lot of dope people on the show, so I'm a little nervous about whether I'm going to stand up to the same level or whatever, but I'm excited to be here. So I'm Shontavia, and the thing that I loved about your tweet from a couple of weeks ago, or if it was last week, I actually don't remember, is you were talking about Black educators and entrepreneurs, and I fit into both of those buckets. And I find a lot of times, especially in higher ed, that you find people who are educators or entrepreneurs, but it's hard to find both. So I was excited just to see that the context of your show is the intersection sometimes of both of those. So for those who are unfamiliar with my work, I help working professionals start businesses while they're working full time. And it's something that I did. So my background is law, but I've been in higher ed for about 15 years, first as a professor, now as a university administrator. And so I have seen how hard it is to start a business when you're working full time, but so many people, successful entrepreneurs, start when they have a main hustle. And the side hustle is the thing that gets them economic independence. And that's what I'm passionate about, helping people figure out what their passion and purpose is, and then whether or not that should be a business or not, so that they can get out of the rat race and get economic independence.
I hear. And I'm all about the side hustle and multiple streams of income. I'm not telling no educator who listens to my podcast to quit their full-time gig. Mm-hmm. No. Because let me tell you right now, being someone who does what I do, and people, you've heard me say this before, is I can literally work on a project and still not see income come from that project for a while. But my school district, they could fire me in 3 weeks. But you know what? For those days I showed up, they're going to have to write me a check for them days. And so I'm always telling educators, create the side hustle, because we got bills, and you know what I'm saying? We got bills.
Amen to that. And not just you have bills, but you have so much knowledge that other people don't have. If you spend time in a classroom, I don't care what level of child you're teaching, you've acquired so much knowledge, and not just about the subject matter, but interpersonal skills, conflict resolution, mediation. And so you've acquired all these skills in the classroom that can translate, to your point, into multiple streams of income. And if 2020 hasn't taught us anything else, is that nobody is coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. And you do that through economic independence. I don't want to wait on a check from the government. I want multiple checks coming in every month.
Yes. Hey, I tell people all the time, we on our own. Speaking of Black folk, I said, we can't be dependent on nobody to come save, because they've shown us since 1863 that they ain't here to save us. So we got some work to do. So I'm always curious as to how someone got to where they are. So what did you think you would be doing when you were growing up? And I'm going to sidetrack this entrepreneurship question what drew you to the field of education?
So, all right. So your first question, what did I think I'd be doing when I was little, when I was growing up? I thought I'd be an astronaut. And I thought I'd be an astronaut because my parents, like many actually of my friends' parents, I grew up around mostly Black people. Our parents taught us so much about Black history. So I grew up learning about Mae Jemison and the way in which she was able to break barriers. I knew about Katherine Johnson and her work at NASA when I was a little child, and I thought I would be an astronaut. Those were the stories that resonated with me. And I don't know, why I stuck specifically with that. I've always been very interested in space or whatever, but I thought I'd be an astronaut. And in addition to having this background of my parents always talking to us about Black history, like I didn't know there were coloring books that were not Black history oriented, because that's all we had growing up in my household. My mother was an educator, my father was an entrepreneur, and many of the people in my family were educators or entrepreneurs. So I don't know if it is just a generational pull, but I saw that growing up, and that is how I really ended up, I guess, in both fields. I just saw so many people doing those things. And specifically with education, to your question, I'm a lawyer by training, patents, trademarks, copyrights. So I'm an intellectual property and entertainment lawyer by training. And I was working at a law firm. It was a big law firm, largest law firm in my state. And about a year and a half in, I realized it just was not for me. I was the first Black woman they'd ever had practicing law at this law firm. And it was hard. It was really, really hard. By the time I quit on April Fool's Day. I'll never forget it, because I was driving into work and I was crying. And I said to myself by the time when I got there, I just will not feel like this anymore. I just refuse. So I walked in and I quit. And I did not have a plan. I didn't know what to do. I went to South Africa for a few months. And before I left to go to South Africa, my mentor said, you should you should think about teaching, in particular teaching law. And that's what I did when I came back from South Africa.
Wow. She did. She went all Dave Chappelle on us.
I did. I dumped my boyfriend. I sold everything I owned. I quit the job and I went to South Africa. I did.
Wow. Okay. All right. Yeah, you don't hear that every day.
No.
So what, and this is what I'm curious now, because, okay, you have your law degree. Mm-hmm. You are teaching, you're working in higher ed. What attracted you to entrepreneurship?
Mm-hmm. So there was a moment on that April Fool's Day when I was in the parking deck of my former law firm where I thought, I should start a business. I could start a law firm, I could do consulting, but I got scared in that moment. Like, I don't know how to start a business. I don't know how to do all these things. So I took a safer route. But when I was in Cape Town, which is where I was living in South Africa for the time, I was there for a few months, I was always attracted to the local entrepreneurs, the people who were selling things on the side of the street or in these collective markets. It just drew me to them. When I came back to the US, I took a teaching position at a university in New Orleans. And it was the same thing when I was there. I was always drawn to the entrepreneurs, to the creators, to the entertainers. And I had this background in copyrights and trademark law. So I decided to create kind of like a side hustle law firm, helping people with their legal issues. And that's what drew me into business in the first instance. And when I started doing that, I realized, I can do lots of things. Starting a business is scary, but it's not impossible. And so that's how I expanded out into doing what I do now.
NOLA's my city.
Okay. I love New Orleans. Oh, I love New Orleans.
I'm 2 hours away.
Okay.
And, I've been to New York. I lived in Boston for 3 years. I've been to every state on the East Coast, with the exception of DC and Delaware.
Okay.
And nothing to me is like NOLA. My wife and I have been there so many times, and you go back and it's like, we haven't been to this restaurant, we haven't been to this place.
Mm-hmm.
It is just like, we still got to get the emeralds. I told the wife, once everything is to get, when they get a vaccine, because
Mm-hmm.
I ain't trying it. I don't know about these people out here just trying to live it. They trying to act like COVID don't exist no more. They just all out. Ain't got no
Oh
man.
my gosh,
I'm
you're
like, y'all
right.
better, what? Look, I don't want to quote Mayor Keisha Bottoms when she told those black folk in Atlanta that time, like, like, take your home.
That's right.
But that's how I'm feeling. Like, even in my own city, my wife and I, we had to go to the post office and everything. My wife all goggles and masks and
Mm-hmm.
all that stuff. And I'm just sitting there in the parking lot. I'm just waiting. I'm seeing people come in and out.
Mm-hmm.
What's wrong with y'all? Like, I understand you wanting to return to your life before. I get that. But Rona ain't playing with y'all. Right? Just be real.
Right.
She ain't playing with y'all. So y'all be better. Like right now, Trump got his thing and got all them folk in that arena. And watch, people gonna be like, I don't need no mask. That's political. Okay, now when the Rona gets you.
And the thing that I think often when I hear people say this, we just want to get back to our lives. If you look at what's happening in the US in particular and around the world right now, do you really want to get back to what it was before? Or do we want something better? Do we want something new? Do we want something different? Do we want something where consistently in global history, there's been a pandemic every 100 years? Why not instead take the steps we need to take today so our grandchildren will not be dealing with the same things we're dealing with right now? So when I hear all of these different things, fundamentally, politics aside, like, why don't we create something new, different, and better instead of the same old things that we were doing before? So many of us are in a rat race. This is another reason I started my business. We are in this rat race of paying bills, going to work, spending less time with our children, less time with our families. Why not instead create a framework for your life that allows you to do the things that you only dream about, right? And I don't care if it's COVID-19 or a pandemic or some other pandemic or a financial crash. Take the time you have right now, not to wish about what you had before, but to create something better. And that's what I get to do every day. And I just love that I get to do that work as an entrepreneur, in addition to still being an educator and doing a lot of the same things actually in my full time. Well, I mean, it's really 2 full-time jobs, but in my other life as an educator too.
I hear you. Hey, I'm telling people, it's just amazing how when this whole thing hit and they start to shut stuff down, those people who had jobs that were able to be done online, for the most part, kept their jobs. And those people that were not lost their jobs. And then you saw the influx of companies like Instacart coming in, and that allowed some people to become employed. But I'm like, people, I've always told educators throughout my tenure at my school that we are in a digital mobile world, period. And we should think about that when we're teaching our students, understanding we're not teaching the students that were in school when we were there, and we can't teach them the way we were taught. Like, just let that go. But if this ain't told you what this internet life, this mobile life is all about, they better learn. Like, my wife even told me there were people who were working in buildings where their bosses were like, oh, you can work remote. They were literally carrying out their desktop to take it home. One, I'm thinking like, I'm glad they still got a check, but also I'm thinking companies buy them people a laptop. They don't need to be carrying around no desktop, be doing their work. But I want people to understand, like, the game is different. Like, so many businesses are not going to be coming back, or if they do come back, it is definitely going to be coming back in a way to where the retail space will be smaller, and that online space is going to get bigger for that company. And I know if I had a restaurant, if I knew my stuff was popping, I would tell my customers, we ain't coming back face to face. I'm sorry. Everything gonna be delivered now. And those people that I would have as waiters and the front desk people, hey, everybody gonna deliver now. Because that's how we doing that. Because I just look at it, how my life has changed. I don't even want to go to a theater anymore. I've been streaming at the crib like I've been doing. I'm like, And then Disney fooled around and released Trolls streaming. I was like, this is a really good experience. I'm at my house watching this movie. And some other companies have done that. Studios have done that too. They're like, we're going to drop this little movie here, because I'm like, they need to go ahead and do that. So we can, okay. All right. We need to get on back to this. But I'm glad
could I say something to that though?
Yeah, go ahead.
I love that you brought that up. So last year, I spoke at South by Southwest. I was supposed to be there this year, but it got canceled because of COVID-19. But last year, I spoke there, and then I went to several panels. And consistently, the one thing people said across probably 10 or 15 different presentations that I went to is that kids last year who are 12 years old will have jobs when they graduate from college that do not exist yet. Something like 70% of all kids who were 12 years old last year will have jobs when they graduate that do not exist yet. So you're exactly right that we as educators should not only be preparing ourselves, but also these kids for a world that does not exist right now. So we have to be thinking differently. Like you talked about restaurant owners being delivery. Like, be delivery, but what can you do online? Like, can you create a digital platform where you're teaching people how to prepare their meals at home? Can you create a digital platform where you have an audio-visual cookbook? What ways can you be innovative for teachers? There's so many opportunities for teachers right now to educate other parents about how to educate these kids who are at home 24 hours a day. If I was teaching K through 12 right now, that's what I would be doing. I would be figuring out ways to diversify my income streams. And I would not be focused so much on going back to what I had 4 months ago.
So when it hit you, right, you're back from your visit to the motherland, and you're ready to start your business. What was that process that you went through in determining sort of which entrepreneurial path was right for you? Because you do have this legal background, and you could have gone in all sorts of directions. How did you determine which one, like the path you're on now, how did you determine that was where you needed to be?
Oh, I love this question because I did what so many new entrepreneurs do, which is the wrong thing, which is I went in all the directions. I did everything for everybody. If they told me they would pay me for it, within, legally, I would do it. You needed a contract drafted, I was with you. If you wanted to get a prenup before you got married, I was helping you. You needed a trademark application, I was doing everything. I was doing everything to everybody because, frankly, by that point, I needed the money. Because the thing I didn't say about when I left my law firm job and started teaching, I took a temporary position that literally paid $100,000 less. And that was, like that reaction you just had, this is the reaction my mother had. I thought she was going to kill me. And so I needed the money. I had bought a house. I had the golden handcuffs at this law firm. I had bought a house. I had very, very nice things. I was traveling. I was doing all these things. When I left that job, I still had to pay for those things. I moved halfway across the country to New Orleans. And I'm originally from the Southeast, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. So I had basically 2 households to pay for. And it was hard. So I was doing everything. But what I realized as I was doing everything is that when you're doing everything, you're doing yourself a disservice. And so I decided to instead get really, really focused on a couple of things. Well, really one thing, ultimately one thing. And what I apply in my life right now is the rule of one, which is you sell one thing, you have one idea, and you sell it to one person. One idea, one thing, one person. Because when you're working full time, like just about all of my clients, you don't have a lot of time. You have a spouse, maybe, you have kids, you have your full-time job, you have life, you have sororities and fraternities and church and whatever. So you don't have all the time in the world to create this huge, multifaceted, multi-tentacled business. So I sell one idea to one person, and I have one thing that I'm selling within that. And what that allows me to do, and what that allows other working professionals to do, is to get really, really good at that thing, create the right systems so that it's bringing in recurring revenue. Then you can diversify. Then you can do other things. And a lot of people don't want to do that. We're multi-passionate. We've learned so much that we think we can sell. Other people are telling you, oh, well, you're really good at this, so you can do this. You're really good at writing resumes, so you ought to do that. You're good at motivating kids, so you ought to go to do that. And instead, what I teach and what I implement in my own life is I do one thing. And does that mean I'm turning down money sometimes? Yes. But how many of us have said yes to something knowing we should have said no and immediately regretting it? And then it becomes like the worst thing in your life because you already don't want to do it. It takes longer than you think. It's more expensive than you think. And you're probably not getting paid enough on top of all of that.
Wow. Wow. I love that. Ooh, that one. Oh my gosh. I love that.
The rule of one, you have one idea, you sell one thing, you sell it to one person.
Um, if you will, walk us through the work that you do, right? Because earlier you mentioned the multi-passionate entrepreneur and you mentioned the power of one, which I love that so much. Wish I'd have came up with it. And when you could be anything, but what's interesting is in law, it's normal, I assume, to specialize in family law, or you mentioned IP, or entertainment. But when you're an educator, you're doing everything. Mm-hmm. And you can be teaching so many subjects and all of that stuff that entails. And when you're thinking about creating that business, it's kind of hard to zero in on that power of one, zero in on that niche that you are going to build your business from. How do you work with that multi-passionate entrepreneur who comes to you and says, man, I love all of this, and you're trying to get them to understand the power of one?
Mm-hmm. So that's an excellent question, and I love it because you're right. So many people, especially educators, juggle a lot of things, and we think we are supposed to always be doing many things at once. We're supposed to have lots of balls in the air at once. And what I tell people when they're multi-passionate is you can do one of two things. Well, really more, but there are two things you can really do to move forward. You can do all those different things you want to do, but you have to accept that you'll likely make less money. It'll take you more time, and you're going to spend a lot more energy. Because when you are doing two things at once, for example, so say you're really good at braiding hair and you're really good at teaching math. And if you're going to do both of those things, they require different skill sets. They require you to talk to two very different groups of people. They require you to create two different business models. And so it's going to take you a long time to figure that out, to get it to where you have good systems in place. And so if you want to be multi-passionate and do lots of things, then okay, we can work with it. The reason, though, that I think the rule of one makes so much more sense, particularly when you're busy, particularly when you already have a full-time job, is because it works so much better because you can take all of your energy and put it into that one thing. And the way you can figure out what that one thing is there are a couple of things. So number one, whatever you believe in, God, the creator, Allah, whatever you call whatever that person is, if you believe in something, you're on this earth for a reason. And we get clues about what those things are. So what are the things people are already reaching out and asking you for your help with? What are the things that you would do for free? Where are you already volunteering your time? Because what that shows you is that you already have some natural inclination to something. And if you already have that natural inclination to something, then you have clues about where you could spend less time getting a business off the ground and doing something that will not only bring you in multiple streams of revenue, but things that you already know. So you don't have to go out and acquire a lot of new skills. And the example that I love to use about this is Oprah, because Oprah started her career in the 70s in 1976, and she only did television for almost 10 years. She wasn't in her first film until like 9 years after she started her career in television. And that film was The Color Purple. She didn't start her business until the following year in 1986. So for a decade, all Oprah did was television. And the business, once she created the business a decade in, it was just the Oprah Winfrey Show for 7 years, until she started doing other television shows with other people like Dr. Phil and Dr. Oz and all of those things. And so I understand thinking we need to be out here all the time, juggling lots of things. But when you look at the most successful people on the planet, who have not only made billions and billions of dollars, but also impacted multiple lives, many, many millions and millions of lives, they've done that. They focused on one thing. Steve Jobs was the same way. Apple created computers for a very long time until they got that really, really good. Then they started making phones. Then they could revolutionize with the iPad and all those things.
Mm.
And so this is just why I think it's good to have focus. Again, you don't have to stay there forever, but it is good to have that focus when you're starting, particularly when you're really, really busy.
And when that person pushes back, which I'm assuming they will, how do you get them to understand, sort of get out of their own way, really, and understand that it is very helpful for them to not have to try to do everything, to not have to put that much, not only physical, mental, emotional effort, but even the financial investment in trying to do all of those things? That in fact, if you do this, this is your roadmap to being successful and becoming profitable sooner.
And so I have to quote my grandmother, who had a second grade education from a very, very small town in South Carolina. And what she would tell us all the time before she died is that she could show us better than she could tell us. And that is usually my response. Well, you go, let's try it your way. Let's try to do these multiple things. See how much time it takes. See how much your income is. See how much energy you're spending in addition to doing all the other things that you want to do. Try it. And if it works, great. You have proven me wrong. But when it doesn't, because it typically doesn't, when it doesn't work, let's come back and try to whittle things down and figure it out that way. There's an entrepreneur who I follow. Her name is Marie Forleo. And one of the things she says is clarity comes from engagement, not thought. And so if all you're doing is turning these things over in your head and saying, oh, well, I think I can do this and I think I can do that, then you're not ever going to get clarity. You don't know if somebody's going to buy your product until you actually sell your product. You don't know if anybody is going to come to your speaking engagement unless you actually have one. You don't know if somebody's going to buy your book until you actually write the book. And so you have to take some affirmative steps to get those results. And when it doesn't work, that's fine too. Fail forward. I have started 5 businesses in my life. And those first 4, I mean, they got some success, but they didn't always work that well. I just failed forward. And that's what you have to be comfortable with doing.
So how does one determine sort of their value add, right? I hear that a lot in terms of when people talking about business is this isn't like a vanity game. This isn't sort of you going, I like baking cookies, so I'm going to sell cookies. It's about looking at the marketplace and where people have pain points and figuring out where's the gap where you can actually solve a problem. So what is your value add? How did you discover your value add? And how do you assist your clients in sort of understanding the problem that their business has to solve?
So Gosh, that's a great question. So if you are not solving someone else's problem, you likely will not have a long-term successful business. And you have to get comfortable with realizing that nobody wants to buy Dr. Will's widget. Nobody wants to buy Shontavia's online program. They want to buy a solution to a problem. They want to have a better financial plan if they're listening to Dr. Will's podcast. They want to understand, if they're working with me, that they're going to get from point A to point B with their business. They want a solution to their problem. They don't want to work with me just because I'm so great, right? And so the best businesses figure out what that problem is, and that's what they talk about. That's what they create all their content around, and that's what they sell. And so for me, my value add is that I help working professionals start businesses while they're working full time. And the way you know that I can solve your problem, and my value add to drill down even further to your point, you can look at all the things I've done in my life. You can see that I've twice been named one of the best lawyers in America. You can see that I've written about trademark law and entrepreneurship and had those pieces named the best in the world. You can look at my background and see I've worked at some of the best law firms in America. You can look at my background and see, oh, well, she's failed, but she picked herself back up. And not that I've just done it for myself, but I've done it for other people. So when you go to my website, you have to click around a lot to get to my bio. But if you go to shontavia.com and you look at the front page of my website, the first couple of things you see after I say, hey, I can help you, is there are testimonials where other people say, hey, Shontavia has helped me. And that's the real value add. You got to the heart of the issue when you said, how do you help people solve other people's problems? How do you figure out what problem you're going to solve? And you have to demonstrate that. And one thing I have to say this about new entrepreneurs in particular, especially if they're coming from backgrounds that are more risk averse. So like education, like law, like some of those more traditional fields. Medicine is another one. I work with so many judges and doctors. I can't even tell you how many judges, doctors, and professors actually who I work with who are very, very risk averse. When you get down to it, there are going to be a lot of people who do what you do. There are all kinds of teachers. There are all kinds of education podcasts. There are people who call themselves entrepreneurs on every street corner. But the things that make you you, all those things in your background are going to be the things that form the basis of your value add. So like I just mentioned to you about all the things in my background, like those are things, you might have some of those things, but there's not another person on the planet who has all of those things, who is also married with 3 children and working a full-time job, who has a law degree, but also has a bioengineering degree, who is a late 30s-year-old woman living in the deep South. And so all those things together are the way you connect with people. So you don't have to be competing with everybody else. You just have to figure out where you fit in the marketplace, where you're different, and where you can solve somebody else's problems.
So how did you determine your business model, right? Because when you're coming from the outside and not understanding business and understanding well, you have where you can sell to other businesses, you can sell directly to consumers, etc. How did you figure out what your model was going to be? And I'm not going to ask you about this other stuff because people money is their money. But when it comes to the pricing, right? How did you figure that out? Because I've had people on my show who are like, we 7 figures over here. When you put out that product, it's always the high end offer. It's not the low end, because you have to sell so much of that low end to hit a certain financial goal. And I'm like, oh, okay. And I just attended a webinar this week about a course creator, and she has this whole program, and it was like, oh, our normal price is $19.95, and I'm saying to myself, what?
Was that Daniel Leslie?
You know what? I ain't saying nobody's
Okay.
names.
Okay.
you,
Okay.
you know what? Look,
Okay.
I ain't saying nobody's
Okay.
names, but
That person who shall not be named.
yes.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up that whole question, that concept, and that specific individual who will not be named, because I actually have taken that course. And I've taken multiple courses. So this is part of the answer to your question.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you figure out your model, and how do you figure out your price point? So what I would say about both, and this is what I tell my clients, the people who work with me, that it's easy to get on Google and figure out what other people are charging. It's easy to get on Google and see 12,000 different business models. But at the end of the day, you should create the thing that fits within your life. You should create the price point that fits within what you are comfortable with. And the way that you figure out what that looks like. So first of all, you have to take a real assessment of your life. So like me, I'm married, I have 3 children. They're all under the age of 10. I don't have a whole lot of free time. I have very little free time. And so a model that works for a person who is, single, or a person who does not have a full-time job or whatever, is just going to look very different. So the first thing is, what does your life look like? Like, get really honest on what your life looks like, and what do you really have time for? What do you really have capacity for? And frankly, and nobody wants to talk about this, but what's your self-esteem like? If you get up and you don't believe you're worth $10,000, nobody's going to pay you $10,000. You have to believe it first. And so when I hear people say, oh, you should only sell high ticket items, I'm not saying I disagree with that, but your self-esteem has to match that. Otherwise, nobody's going to believe you're worth that if you don't believe it yourself. You have to teach people how to value you. So in terms of what your business model looks like, it has to look like your life. So my business model looks like, okay, I can spend so many hours a week during the week and on the weekend. And what I have the capacity for is the rule of one. I have the capacity right now to sell one thing. And my target, so you asked about money, and I don't mind talking about money. We can talk about money all day long if you want to. But in terms of my business model, when I started, I said, I want to make $5,000 a month, like $5,000 a month. So I had to do the math and figure out what I could sell within the amount of time I had that would get me to $5,000 a month. Now it's, I want to make, let's see, 4, 5, 6. I want to make 6 figures a month. Well, 5 figures a month. And so I sell things that get me to 5 figures a month. And the other thing it depends on, in my opinion, is what your point is. Like, some people, the point is not to make money. For some people, the point is not to get rich. Maybe it's to make money. If you have a business, you need to make money, right? But if the goal is, I want to make money, but right now I need to build my brand, then maybe you're selling something that you can sell to 20,000 people at a lower price point, so that 20,000 people are now in your funnel who can buy things later, who can buy more expensive things down the line. I really think it depends on your specific goals. That is not to say that it's bad advice to price yourself at a premium. I think that is excellent advice. I price myself at a very high premium, and I'm comfortable with that. I feel okay with that. I did not start that way. I did not start out feeling like I could charge people $100 an hour, let alone what I charge now, which is $500 an hour if you want to work with me one-on-one. And so that is something I just had to get comfortable with. It was not something 10 years ago I was going to come out of the gate doing. And you have to just be comfortable with that. The other thing, and this is something that not enough people do, you actually have to figure out who your target, not just your target audience, but who's your ideal customer, and go ask them, what would you pay for this? And hey, I actually happen to have it. Will you buy it from me? You'll find out really quickly what your price point should be. If you say, hey, I'm selling this for $800 and nobody buys it, and that's your target audience, either your target audience is wrong or your price is wrong. So going out and asking people, again, clarity comes from engagement, not sitting around thinking about it. You can Google all day long. It matters a hill of beans if nobody's really going to pay you for
Mm. She is over here. she said, woo.
But and I have to say about the program you mentioned, if it's the same course creator I'm thinking about, what I will say about her, and I will say too, and I tell my clients this, I have taken a lot of online courses. I've taken Brendan Burchard's course. I've taken Marie Forleo's courses. I have taken Rachel Rogers' courses. I've taken Daniel Forleo's courses, Amy Porterfield, a lot of these big names in the industry, Jeff Walker, Mary Morrissey, a lot of those. I've spent, probably, I don't know, $20,000 on courses. When I really started implementing that advice and I created a system, I made it back in less than a month. And so sometimes you have to be willing to invest in yourself to get to that level. Like if you can't spend, and I understand that there are financial limitations, but if you can't spend money investing in yourself, why would somebody else give you money to invest in themselves? You have to be willing to do the things you're asking your customers and your clients to do.
I hear you. So you're saying DL keeps your pockets paid well.
I'm saying within a week of starting Danielle's course, I made my money back within a week.
Wow.
Within 3 days, I made more money. Her class, you're right, cost $2,000. I made that back in 3 days. And that was a long time ago.
See, when I first started doing my first set of podcast shows 8 years ago, she was one of the first sort of guests to pop on. And I've done a couple of episodes with her. She's dope. I'm one of those people again. Look, I will invest in myself, but I am also an educator. And when you look at my check versus some other folks' check, certain prices are real high for like we would have to put some money away to save for that, because I ain't touching my money I got stashed. But just like I sell to educators, and I know what their money look like because I know what my money look like. And so I'm very conscious in my pricing because I know what they got coming in just from their district money. So when you told me something, when you were throwing out them names like the B School and all that stuff, I'm like, ooh. I said, Shontavia's out here. She for real. she ain't playing. She ain't one of people say, you know what, I'm not a doctor, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express. She not one of those people. She for real.
Well, I feel like you have to be, right? So, and the reason at the end of the day, seriously, truly at the end of the day, and this is something I learned when I was in South Africa, I would meet people, and like in the US, you meet somebody, you ask them what they do, and they say, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm a teacher, I'm a principal, I'm a blah, 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 blah. I would meet people in the poorest neighborhood, actually not just in South Africa, because I don't want to say, I actually lived in a very wealthy neighborhood, actually a wealthier neighborhood than I've ever lived in the United States. These people are living great over there. But when I would go to some of the poorest neighborhoods in South Africa, same was true in Haiti, same was true in China, same was true throughout Europe. When I've traveled to these places, you meet people and they say, I'm a child of God. And I am a child of my creator. And I feel like my creator has put me on this earth for a reason. And I do the things I do so that I can fulfill the purpose for which I was put on this earth. And I take that very seriously. And if that means, like the first course I took was Brendan Burchard's, and it cost me probably $5,000 in total to take the course, go out to California, stay there for a week or whatever. I had to save for years. I saved for years. And I felt so about the course at first, but I started implementing those principles. And again, I had to make the sacrifice. I saved for years. I made the sacrifice and it really did pay off. Now, I'm not saying go out there and throw your money at anybody. You do your research, you do your due diligence. But I take my work very serious. Everybody who knows me, I was a serious child. I have been serious since I was put on this earth. I would walk around at 8 thinking, I shouldn't do that, because when they make the story of my life, I'm not going to want to have to tell people I did this very embarrassing thing. So I take my work very, very seriously. And I said at the top of the show, I don't want to sit around and wait for a stimulus check. I want to be and I was this time around when the government was sending out checks, I didn't get one. You know why? Because my tax bracket did not allow me to get one of those. I don't want to be relying on somebody else, because I know these folks don't care about me. I don't care who's in office. Who cares about me is me. Who cares about me are the people I love. And I want to do things that fulfill my purpose, improve other people's lives, and create opportunities and financial independence for me and my family. And that's why I do what I do.
Okay.
I got on my soapbox. I'm gonna get down off my soapbox.
I'm all right. Look, I'm just hearing that this ain't Monopoly going on over here. You got real treasury notes going on. I'm like, go ahead. I'm Esquire. Go ahead and make that money. I'm so happy for you. Wow. Whew. Okay. Hey, wow.
Throw some water at you.
People, educators, when you listen to this podcast, okay, when you hear the goals she has set for herself, but really listen to the names she has thrown out in terms of the courses she has taken. These ain't folk who telling you you can get this opportunity to learn for $199. Like these people ain't no joke. So yes, I'm with you. I'm riding with you all day. So
can I say one more thing about that?
Yes, ma'am.
So with those names I mentioned, the other thing you may notice if you Google those names, there's not a lot of Black people mentioned in that group. There's not a lot of people. There's no people of color. Well, Rachel Rogers, she is a Black woman. She's, I think she's mixed, but she identifies as Black. But otherwise, these are a lot of white people who were born into this world with some amount of privilege, and that's okay, who are teaching people how to create whatever the thing is that they're selling. And one of the reasons that I do what I do, and I'm priced a little less than them, at least with some of the things I do now, it's because I realized that it's like you said, your target audience. I know my target audience, and I know what I want to do. And what I want to do is create more, in particular, women millionaires, Black millionaires, millionaires who come from socioeconomic backgrounds where people ain't never had nothing. Because if we look at the world we live in today, there are protests happening literally every day. There are people being murdered in the street every day. One of the ways you impact that, one of the ways you can make real social impact, I don't care what anybody says, is money. Black Lives Matter got $100 million from a bunch of billionaires. You have to have financial independence to be able to do that. And if you're waiting on a minimum wage check from somebody else, if you're waiting on a middle class check from somebody else, then you will continue to wait. What I want to create are people who can fund candidates, people who can support social movements, people who can say, I'm taking a stand for justice. I want to eliminate oppression in my community, in this country, globally, whatever it is you want to do. And last week, I interviewed Alelia Bundles, who is the great-great-granddaughter of Madam C.J. Walker. And one of the things we talked about was how Madam Walker was the first self-made millionaire in America. She happened to be a Black woman who was born to parents formerly enslaved. She was the first of her siblings to be born free. Madam Walker would take her money and support protests. She would take her money
and fund scholarships for kids to go to HBCUs. She had saleswomen around the country who worked for her. She would teach them not just how to be salespeople, but how to be entrepreneurs, how to create their own businesses. And that is something that I think Black entrepreneurs have to do. And that is one of the reasons my business model, you asked about I think this was the business model question. I don't know how we got off on this tangent, but my business model supports Black women in particular. Most of the students in the Brandon Business Academy, which is kind of like my version of some of these other courses you just mentioned, are Black women. And they're professional Black women, successful Black women. They're doing all kinds of things. But it's not enough for us to sit in this middle class place. We have to be the George Soros. We have to be so Robert F. Smith, he's the wealthiest African American on this planet. We have to be Bill Gates. We have to be creating some of these foundations. We have to be Mark Zuckerberg, not just going and asking for money, but writing those checks. Mm-hmm. And I feel very strongly about that.
Hey, I'm with you too. I just got off the interview beforehand. I'm telling that person that I don't believe in no marching. I believe in ownership, and how too many of us will go at it alone, mm-hmm. instead of pulling the resources. You know, Butch Graves, I saw him speaking. He was on this Black Enterprise stage where I didn't go there personally. You know, my money is, you know, what Kevin Hart say, the way my money work, I got a checking in the savings. But I was watching him on YouTube, and he was talking about how where we fail is this brother right here can own this sort of construction company or and where he's doing renovations on some houses and some other things. This brother is over here, they doing the same thing. And instead of them getting together and forming this one big company where now they can do airports, mm-hmm. right? And they can do hotels. They're just doing this, you know, small things together. And individually, they may be okay. But if they would work together and form this bigger company, now they're building wealth. Mm-hmm. And with that wealth becomes hiring more people who look like you and forming these other partnerships where now, again, you're getting bigger and bigger and being able to create full-scale change the way it needs to happen. You know, I always tell people that part of my mindset is, I'm telling Black people when I talk about financial literacy, particularly in K-12 education and entrepreneurship education, and why we need to build and own, is you have a different leveraging position when you can go to someone and you don't need anything from them. Mm-hmm. Right. So economically, when you are going to the table and when you can just straight up walk away, mm-hmm. that's a whole new ball game as sitting up there waiting on somebody. I know when I heard the story of LeBron James, and this was crazy, when he was literally in the hood, public housing, in a meeting with Reebok, and the man wrote him like a $20 million check and said, I will give you this money right now if you don't take that meeting with Nike. And LeBron got up and walked out. I'm thinking, now most people would not have had the smarts to figure, if this man gonna give me $20 million just not to have a meeting, mm-hmm. what other money is coming down the line? And as we know, LeBron James, that's gonna be another Robert Smith right there real soon. Because he is no joke when it comes to his investment in businesses and ownership. So I love what you're saying. I love it. You know, I want to have more people like you on this show, because I want people thinking about, I used to never want to own a house. My pops used to tell me, go buy a house. I said, man, I don't want to be dealing with no yard. I don't want to deal with the home repairs, none of that stuff. But after purchasing a house, and understanding the key to it, the power in it, not only being able to, leverage the equity in it, but the sheer fact of the fixed interest rate. The bank can't never come to me and say, your mortgage is going up. But if you rent, your rent can go up every year. And either you pay it or you leave, but you don't have any control in what's going on. And so for me, ownership is kind of like, people, if you ain't owning it now, woo.
You're right. And I mean, not only owning tangible assets like houses and land and real estate, but your intangible assets, your trademarks, your copyrights, your inventions. So you mentioned Robert F. Smith earlier. Oprah has said this. Tyler Perry has said something like this. Owning your intellectual property is the way that from 2020 to whatever year, the time that we're in right now, owning your intellectual capital is, I mean, I can't overstate the importance of owning your intellectual capital. The president of Oprah's company 20 years ago did an interview with, I think, Ebony or Essence magazine. And no, it was Fortune magazine. And what he said in Fortune magazine is that at the end of the day, Harpo Incorporated is an intellectual property company. We own everything. This is LeBron James's model. This has been Michael Jordan's model, to own the brand. You own the things that you create and you can leverage them. The thing Robert F. Smith said about 2 years ago was that this is the only time in history where you could, with a laptop, a phone, and your mind, create multiple millions of dollars worth of wealth for yourself. And he's right. And we have to think about ourselves this way, educators especially. You're the keepers of the knowledge. If you don't own your intellectual capital, you should sit down after listening to this episode, figure out what are the things that you are creating and whether or not you can own and leverage those things to create wealth for yourself. It is critical. It is critical, particularly for communities of color, because for centuries, we have created culture. Yes. We have created community. We have invented things. And other people have made the billions of dollars. This entire country was built off of the intellectual, not just the physical labor, but the intellectual labor of Black people. And we have to start taking some of that back.
So I'm gonna throw this out there to you. Okay. Because I know that I did not coin the phrase Edupreneur. I know I didn't do that. You can do a Google search and just, but I do have a documentary called The Edupreneur, which is on Vimeo and Amazon Prime. And the brother trying to get on YouTube too, so it'll come up on that search and you can just purchase it right there too. I ain't playing with this money, y'all. But when you have something, when you create something that the name you did not create, and it's sort of in the common realm, so to speak, how do you trademark that? And I don't need any sort of specifics because, I'm
going to start the clock on you.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? I know I ain't paying for this. But is it possible when someone is creating something where it's part of sort of a common lexicon, so to speak, and you're creating a product that pulls from that, is it possible to actually trademark that and own that intellectual property?
Yes, of course. A trademark I owned for years, I think I just let it go recently, was A Different World. We all watched A Different World in the 80s and 90s or whatever time that was. I owned the trademark for a long time because nobody else did. And I was going to actually create a podcast called A Different World at that time. And so, yes, the answer is yes. I have 2 podcast episodes. I have a podcast called The Shontavia Show about this, and I can share the links with you if you want to put them in the show notes. Yes, but the short answer is yes. With trademarks in particular, it's not that you've created something new. It's that you have taken the phrase, so Edupreneur, for example, and you have attached it to a product that you are selling or offering for sale, and that your customers, when they see Edupreneur, they think of your business or you. And that's it. It does not have to be a new word. It doesn't have to be something you created. Look at the word Apple. Apple has created $1 trillion business calling their laptops Apple laptops, or their phones Apple phones. They didn't invent the word Apple, and they didn't have to. It's just, are you using the word in a way that builds relationship with customers who are either going to buy your service, or you're going to offer it to them? Essentially, there's some nuance there, but the short answer is yes.
Okay. Oh, y'all people, what? Cha-ching! I done heard me make maybe some more coin off of this bad boy. The Edupreneur 2 is being edited right now. So yeah, I'm trying to do this thing out here.
Okay.
So I want to ask you about success as an entrepreneur, right? How do you define it? Is it the check, right? Is it the impact you're making, or is it a combination of both?
So I think it depends on who you are. The way I define success is really in 3 ways. The first is, am I walking within the purpose God has put me on this earth for? Number 2, am I positively impacting the lives of other people? Number 3, am I creating opportunities and financial independence for myself and my family? Those are the things that I use to define success. It's not awards. It's not being here or there, on this stage, on that stage. I've done some of those things. I've been on some of those stages. And those things are nice, don't get me wrong. But I think where folks can go wrong is assuming that success looks like one thing. Like when I graduated from law school and I started at this law firm that I was telling you about, a lot of people thought that was success. It was a big law firm. I was 27, probably 26, 27 years old. My first salary, the first day I walked into the firm, was $145,000 a year. I bought a house. I had this, I had that, I had whatever. And I was miserable. I was miserable in that position. But folks thought I was successful because I had a great job. I had a this, I had a that, whatever. So what I had to do is realize that didn't really mean that much to me. Having what other people defined as successful didn't mean anything to me. What meant something to me was those 3 things I said. And that is how I just live my life. And so I will say no to a lot of things. Someone asked me yesterday, I was doing a class yesterday. No, it was Thursday. And it's a class that I do called the $1 Million Side Hustle. And in the $1 Million Side Hustle, as I was teaching this class, someone typed in the chat, I want to pay you to review my business plan. Just name your price and I'll pay it. And I told that person, I don't do that. I told y'all what I do. I have one idea, I sell one thing, and I sell to one person because my time is limited. Here's what I value, and this is what I'm going to do. And I live by that. This is not just something I'm teaching other people. And again, like, you don't want to say yes to something knowing you should say no to it. And maybe making the money, but the money really is like not how you value success. And you can be really unhappy with lots and lots of money. And I've been there. I've been broke too. When I left that job making $100,000 less, I was real broke. And I went to Brendan Burchard's class. Like I told you, I had to save for years. I was very broke. I had to save for years, but I knew I didn't want to stay that way.
People. Man, I wish I could charge y'all for this episode. Oh, it's so good. Wow. Shontavia, this has been so good. So good.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Will.
Before we go, how are you living a life of abundance in the midst of COVID-19 and the recession? Like, so many people are, and rightly so, you know, if you're losing your income, or if you've seen a huge dip in your income, right? Because I know some people who, like, they major players on the speaking circuit, right? But guess what happened to them contracts? Where, you know, they started out the year thinking, look, I'm about to pull in $5 million, but all of them conferences, like, boom, boom, boom. some have been able to adapt and find ways to deliver those keynotes or panel discussions and things online, working with those school districts or organizations to create online events. Others just been at the house, and that money ain't coming in. And I know you have that online business, but in the midst of the recession and everything that's going on, how are you able to live your best of life?
So I think my best life is not dependent on my existing circumstances. And what my mama used to tell us this all the time: you stay ready so you don't have to get ready. So like you talked about the speakers who some have adapted, some have lost their contracts or whatever. If they had stayed ready, they would have had a force majeure clause in their contract, so they got paid anyway, right? Or if you were a person who got fired from your job or let go, yes, this is an uncertain time. But you also have to think, if some job was willing to pay me, at $40,000 a year, $60,000 a year, $100,000 a year, whatever, I must have some knowledge that is valuable, right? And what are the ways that I can leverage that knowledge that I have? And so for me, living in abundance, those three things I mentioned: walking within the purpose God has put me on this earth for, improving other people's lives, positively impacting other people's lives, and creating opportunities for myself and my family. If I'm doing those things, I'm good. That is what abundance looks like for me. That is what just life looks like for me. And during this time, whether you call it adapting or surviving or staying ready, I've figured out ways to solve problems. You said it earlier. How can you solve somebody else's problem? And so this time around, when I opened the Brand and Business Academy, I spoke to people who might be in these positions, to people who weren't sure if their jobs would still be there in a week or a month or 3 months, or if they might be furloughed or whatever. I spoke to people who need to make multiple streams of income because they see what's happening in the world. I spoke to people who are angry about seeing people getting murdered in the streets. Like, okay, maybe you can go out and protest, but real change, I mean, it might take protest, but it also takes organizing and it takes ownership, to your point. So which lane are you going to be in? Are you going to be out there protesting? Are you going to be organizing? Will you be part of the economic group that is funneling and supporting financial resources into these things? And that message resonated with people, and it resonated with people in a way so that they wanted to come work with me so that they could create the thing that they plan to create, whatever it looks like. It doesn't matter what kind of business it is, just whatever they're creating. And so that's what I've been doing. I mean, my spouse and I have been working from home since all this started. We will be in the house for a while. We ain't messing with coronavirus. I've got my youngest child has a respiratory illness, so we ain't going nowhere. And we just have to be flexible and figure it out. And that is what we are doing. It's not easy. Obviously, it's not easy for, I think, most people. It's not really easy, but we're figuring it out.
That is all right. Thank you so much, Shontavia, for coming on the show.
Thank you, Dr. Will. This has been fun. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Thank you for coming on the show. You know, you making all that cheese and that corn. I think you were coming on for free. You know, appreciate that. So, people, you know how I do this. This episode will be up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Simplecast, and Stitcher. I need you to subscribe. I need you to follow. Yo, I love the stars, but can a brother get some reviews, some comments, because I'm trying to be found and I'm trying to get Oprah on the show, and I want her to know that I'm doing big things around here. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Shontavia Johnson, Esquire, for coming on and dropping so many gems, and I'd like to thank you for checking out another episode of the Dr. Will Show. As always, people, invest in you. EDU. Peace.